Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Alberta News and Views. Today, Pierre Poilievre addresses Canada's Strong and Free Networking Conference. Pierre Poilievre is absolutely brilliant right here. This plays out like the roast of Justin Trudeau. It really does. He describes Justin Trudeau and his government perfectly. We're going to watch the beginning of that. But first, I have to show you the polling data that just come out. It has Pierre Poilievre at 223 seats. We're talking supermajority territory now. It is just a blue tidal wave going across Canada. So we're going to watch this. And then the big question remains, which I'll talk about at the end, is what is going to happen with Justin Trudeau and his government now after this, after he admitted he doesn't read briefing notes. It's incredible. Watch this.
J'allais commencer mon discours en parlant de mon plan de gros bon sens, de couper taxes et impôts, bâtir des logements, réparer le budget et stopper les crimes. I was going to start my speech today as properly scripted by my team, talking about my common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. But I was interrupted by the testimony I just read from our very own Prime Minister just yesterday. He said something incredible, although not so surprising. Of course, what we're investigating is whether a foreign dictatorship interfered in our democracy in multiple elections to help him win. A communist dictatorship seeking to keep in office someone who said he admires that communist dictatorship. But his defense actually speaks for itself. The Prime Minister was asked why he didn't do anything about this interference, even though he was warned in briefing notes, is that he doesn't read briefing notes. Now, we often don't believe the things that this guy says, but I think that most Canadians would believe that defense. I think it's plausible that Justin Trudeau doesn't read documents that come before him. In fact, I think it's likely that he doesn't read things that come before him. And I think that that defense is interesting for three reasons. One, because the ivory tower elites who support him and his ideology of concentrating all the power in their and money in their hands, they always tell us how wonderfully sophisticated and cosmopolitan they are, how brilliant they are, and that's why they're entitled. They're experts, after all, right? That's why they're entitled to decide for other people. But yet they're prepared to support a guy who says he doesn't read. It's like, he might be a know-nothing, but he's our know-nothing, right? They support a guy who confuses decimals with decibels, who says budgets balance themselves, even when they never do, who says he doesn't think much about monetary policy, admits he's not very good with numbers, advises Canadians to pay for their tuition and their home renovations on their credit card. And this is the bright light, the genius that they believe should be able to run the lives of mechanics who are able to take apart an engine and put it back together with blindfolds on, that the single mom who can balance her budget on a minimum wage salary needs advice on budgeting from the guy who can't budget for himself. That is the ultimate irony of the elitism, is that these pseudo-intellectuals vest all their faith in this guy of all people. The second thing that's so interesting, and this came up, by the way, in his defense on another scandal, when he had accepted a $250,000 free vacation from someone who had met with him asking for, and later received, a $15 million grant from his government. The kind of cronyism that would get a small-town mayor put in jail. But the defense the Prime Minister gave at the time was that in the meeting, he didn't actually, he wasn't substantially important, because he actually doesn't run the government. He's a ceremonial figurehead. and therefore he didn't have any actual power over the government he heads to give the individual what he was asking for in exchange for that famous free vacation, even though in the Prime Minister's own Open and Accountability Guide, the machinery of government, and that's a quote, is the exclusive responsibility of the Prime Minister, which brings me to the second reason why his "I don't read my briefing notes" defense is so interesting.
Listen to this.
And it is this. He wants all the power and none of the responsibility.
Bingo.
He literally wants to control the entire economy. He wants to nationalize large industries with monstrous taxpayer-funded subsidies, and yet he wants to print $600 billion without having any responsibility for the resulting inflation. He wants to increase the cost of government without taking any of the blame for the resulting interest payments that households must pay on their own debt after he drove up the rates. He wants none of the responsibility for the fact that we have the slowest economic growth in the OECD over the next 5 years and over the next 35 years after he promised all this spending was going to stimulate the contrary. He wants to have total control over what you can see and say online, to protect us all from these dangerous forces that might influence our thinking if we're not protected by the angels in the government. And yet, when there is actually a risk of manipulation by hostile and malicious actors, like, say, a communist regime in Beijing, he can't even take the responsibility of reading his briefing notes. This is the irony, the great irony of his leadership, and one of the reasons why I think he's succeeded in doubling housing costs, giving us the worst inflation in 40 years, sending 2 million people to the food banks, 8,000 people signing up for a Facebook group called the Dumpster Diving Network because they now have to eat out of a garbage can after he drove food prices rising with his carbon tax. He wants to control every aspect of your life. And then when he ruins your life, he wants to take none of the responsibility for the ruin that he caused. And
exactly. I'm just going to leave it right there on a high note. So the Liberal government, I think the Liberal government right now is asking themselves, what do we do? We've come accustomed to somebody gets thrown under the bus, right? So who's going to take the fall for this one? Katie Telford? Well, that's his chief of staff. That's the chief of staff. That's his political strategist. They are done. So the polling shows that Pierre Poilievre, there's no signs of slowdown. So they might be saying, Justin, you need to resign. So if Justin Trudeau resigns, then they have a leadership race. Chrystia Freeland has recently said that she would love to be prime minister. Pierre Poilievre has recently said that Mark Carney is the selected next leader of the Liberal Party. They can go down that road and salvage what they can of what's left of the Liberal Party, right? And hopefully stop the freight train that is Pierre Poilievre. They can call a snap election. But if they call a snap election, they got so much more dirt. There's just so many more scandals and so many more committees with investigation, all this stuff still ongoing. So there's going to be more and more and more criminality and ethics and all of these things. So Pierre Poilievre will just keep on steamrolling and just absolutely destroy what is left of the Liberal NDP party. But aside from all of those, like the political stuff, there is record capital investment leaving Canada right now because the outlook for Canada economically is not good, as Pierre Poilievre has just said. The tent towns are increasing rapidly. The housing strategy is not working. We need houses right now. It's going to take years and years to get anything built, and they're not being built because the labor's not there and housing is too expensive to build. We're in stagflation right now. So they call an election and the economy is getting worse and worse and worse. Everything Justin Trudeau has caused is getting worse. He is responsible for it, right? So no matter what, the Liberal Party loses. They just have to decide how bad do they want to lose. And they're hoping that things kind of fade away and disappear because they're all in on it. The corruption is systemic, and that doesn't go away with the problems that they created. So Pierre Poilievre gets in, and all of these liberals live the rest of their life in fear of all of the things coming to the surface, especially when it comes in terms of criminality, because we're getting really close to that, especially with the Winnipeg lab leaks and collusion and all of these other things that are going on with this, with China and the election interference. The stuff that's coming out is just incredible. I have no idea what's going to happen. The smart thing to do would be for Justin Trudeau to resign and not say a word after he's done his resignation. Resign and disappear. So then they get their new party leader, and then we can start seeing what Canada is actually going to look like and get the investment trickling back in. That would be the smart thing. But they're not smart. They're completely incompetent. And this is a planned demolition of Canada. So they're probably going to stretch this out to 2025 and completely destroy the country. And then when Pierre Poilievre gets in, he's left trying to pick up pieces in the ashes. That's probably the most likely outcome. The best outcome, and I hope the businesses and the bankers get a hold of their government and say, you're calling an election right now, because this way Justin Trudeau can get defeated honorably, like an honorable discharge. And then Canadians still feel that there is a democracy, some democracy left. That would be the best approach. I'll keep you updated as usual, and we'll see what happens with this mess. Justin Trudeau is done. It's just a matter of time. Follow me on Substack and Spotify. All of you out there, like, share, and take care.